Now the big lie is that Trump packed the court by Judge Garland, being rejected by Republicans. I mean, that wasn't court packing. That was Republicans saying to President Obama, "You're on your way out the door. You're not going to get a Supreme Court justice as in the middle of an election season." The Democrats would have done it if the shoe were on the other foot. Indeed, that was the practice in Washington, D.C. The Senate controls the opposite party. The president in an election year on his way out the door doesn't get, or even an election year generally, doesn't get to make a Supreme Court pick. And as Ed Whelan, who is a conservative lawyer, expert, constitutionalist, he observed this week that, one of the dirty little secrets is the left was happy to see Judge Garland lose. Why? Because they had it in their head Hillary Clinton was going to win, and then they get a really hardcore Supreme Court justice because Garland wasn't left enough. The latest move by certain members of Congress to introduce legislation to pack the Supreme Court. They want to increase the size of the Supreme Court more or less from 9 members, where it has been for, I think, about 150 years or so, to 13 members. So they not only want to add 3 more members to make up, evidently, for the presidential appointments of President Trump, but 1 more on top of that. So essentially would ensure a radical majority of the court for their agenda for as long as they are able to prevent Republicans from coming into office, which is evidently their goal, to add more members to the Supreme Court to undo the original court packing. And, that's why court packing is such a threat to our constitutional order. Our constitutional republic and the Constitution itself lays out the 3 branches of government: the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature. The legislative branch obviously predominates, I think. The executive branch is controlled by the President of the United States, and the judiciary includes the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, by statute, meaning they don't need to change the Constitution in order to expand or contract. Well, maybe they do have to in order to contract. But they can by statute expand the number of judgeships, both at the federal courts, at the lower court level, and in the Supreme Court. And the last president to attempt to pack the court was FDR. And that effort was turned aside by his own party, who thought it was a bridge too far. And what you do by court packing is it ties explicitly, at least as the left is trying to push it, the change in power in Congress to the nature of the Supreme Court. So it undermines the idea that the court is above politics. It undermines the idea that the court is a co-equal branch of government. It undermines the idea that the court can be accounted upon to apply the law in a neutral manner, in a manner free from political bias. Now, yes, I understand the court is currently made up, and as in the past, often is politicized. But we shouldn't be trying to further politicize it and further undermine really the kind of tenuous protection we have against government that oftentimes wants to encroach on our liberties, encroach on our constitutional freedoms, encroach on our God-given rights. Because if the court's working well, the Supreme Court, it can protect us from violations in that regard. But the left doesn't want the court to get in the way of its agenda, so they want to overthrow it. And let me be clear, you are overthrowing the Supreme Court by politicizing it in such a radical way. Now, many sensible Democrats, and there are some, believe it or not, I know all of you, many of you watching are conservatives and think, oh, the Democrats, they're all terrible people. Oh, they're not. I mean, first of all, a lot of them are your neighbors, and you probably know a few. But my point is, the Democratic Party, putting on my political analyst hat, is in a bit of a heated debate now between, to put it charitably, the old guard, liberals, and the rising and ascendant communist wing. And the rising and ascendant communist wing, the radical extremists in the party, want to blow up the Constitution. They don't believe in the Constitution. They don't believe in America. They want to end the country as we know it. And so they're assaulting the court. And so what will happen if the court is packed? Well, they're hoping the court then starts issuing decisions that would make it nearly impossible for their political opposition to come back into power. But secondly, it would, if the political opposition comes back into power, namely Republicans, it would lead to the court getting expanded and expanded and expanded so that it would be seen by the American people as just another political body, and its decisions similarly distrusted and maligned. And it would lose its ability to effectively check the political party in power, either in the executive branch or Congress, as the Constitution, in theory, designed it to do. And so without that check in place, our Constitution ends. So I tweeted out, or I didn't tweet out because I'm still locked out of Twitter. I guess I'll get into that a little bit later. As I put out on social media, on Facebook and on Instagram, that I fear for the future of our country with this court packing scheme. I fear that our Constitution could end as we know it, and our country could end as we know it. I mean, if you want to destroy people's confidence in the fair administration of justice, turn the Supreme Court into, essentially a congressional commission. It's just awful. And there are other instances, at least in the recent history, of countries where, in Venezuela, for instance, their system prior to Chavez coming in was very much like the US's. But Chavez, being the communist he was, didn't like the idea of a court getting in the way of his revolutionary agenda. And essentially, he packed it. And we know what the history of Venezuela has been like since. The country is now controlled by a communist cabal. Is that what we want for the United States? And it's not even just a policy issue. It's not even a policy issue. This is a question of whether we're going to have a constitutional government or not, and whether by statute Congress will abuse its power to undo the Supreme Court and its role in our nation's public life. Now, that all being said, I don't think the court's above the law any more than Congress is above the law or the president's above the law. And I reject the notion of what I call judicial supremacy, where the court exceeds its authority to overturn well-considered and good faith and constitutional legislation and other actions by the people's elected representatives. But that's not the debate the left is having. The debate the left wants to have is, we want ours on the court and we're going to destroy yours. Now, Joe Biden, again, is walking the line here, and he appointed a commission, which is controlled by the left, that is, I think, likely to endorse some type of court packing plan. And so the left doesn't want to go that fast in terms of packing the court, but the writing's on the wall. You got to hand it to the left. They plan to win. They know what they want, and they begin creating they start managing the battlefield space so that victory is better ensured. That's what they do on elections, and that's what they're doing on with this commission program and such, and now the legislation, which advances the ball even further. Everyone's making big noise, big news. Everyone's pretending it's big news that Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to bring this to the floor. Well, no, what is she going to say? She didn't want to bring impeachment to the floor, and then 10 minutes later, practically speaking, she did. She knows who butters her bread in that regard: the radical left. So this is a very dangerous game President Biden is playing with this commission. It's a dangerous game the left is playing. And I mean, liberals are playing by countenancing and condoning even talking about blowing up the court. I don't know about you, but if I had this idea, well, let's just end the Constitution, let's end representative government, you'd be thinking, well, that's dangerous. You shouldn't talk about that. But what if a president said, well, let's have a commission about ending representative government? And the response is, well, that commission won't recommend it. Well, you don't even want to be debating it, do you? To have the debate is dangerous. So if others have said they're playing with fire here, they're pretending to be outraged. And now the big lie is that Trump packed the court by Judge Garland, being rejected by Republicans. I mean, that wasn't court packing. That was Republicans saying to President Obama, you're on your way out the door. You're not going to get a Supreme Court justice as in the middle of an election season. The Democrats would have done it if the shoe were on the other foot. Indeed, that was the practice in Washington, D.C. The Senate controls the opposite party. The president in an election year on his way out the door doesn't get, or even an election year generally, doesn't get to make a Supreme Court pick. And as Ed Whelan, who is a conservative lawyer, expert constitutionalist, he observed this week that, one of the dirty little secrets is the left was happy to see Judge Garland lose. Why? Because they had it in their head Hillary Clinton was going to win, and then they get a really hardcore Supreme Court justice because Garland wasn't left enough for them. So this is all political gamesmanship, and I don't pretend to say that if the shoe were on the other foot, Republicans would be screaming and all of that in terms of what happened to Garland. But it was politics, and it wasn't an idea that there was someone stole a Supreme Court seat. The Constitution sets up an advice and consent procedure for presidential nominees for the Supreme Court and other high offices like that. And that's the result. Sometimes they lose. It's not packing the court. It's absurd. So I don't want you to think my lighthearted way of talking about these things suggests I'm not outraged about it and I'm not nervous about it. I think we're in a revolutionary period here in the United States where the left sees an opportunity. By the left, I mean the radical communist left sees an opportunity to overthrow our government. And they're being aided and abetted and treated with kid gloves by too many political officials, mostly in the Democratic Party, but some in corporate America who I bet you otherwise nominally are Republicans. And so that, with all that being said, this attack on the Supreme Court is an attack on our constitutional republic. It's fair to say it's a coup. It's a coup against the Constitution and the very notion of three co-equal branches of government with separation of powers and the confidence that you as a citizen can have in the fair administration of the law by the court, which is already on the ropes because too often the court acts too political, even under the current system. Because there aren't enough justices on the court who understand their role is to, as Chief Justice Roberts used to say, although he doesn't act that way, just call balls and strikes as opposed to trying to put their thumbs on the scale and disguising their political desires as decisions required by an application of the Constitution.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.